So I mentioned NBA Playgrounds, obviously, and last week Ben is out of commission this week. That came out wrong. It sounds like he's actually okay. He's just can't make the show this week. He's actually healthy and okay. I chatted to him shortly before we started recording, so he is, he sent his
He's not locked in Andrew's basement. That's what we're just trying to say here.
That's just, suspiciously specific denial, and yeah, he is okay. Sends his love to almost everyone.
I just made that reference because I know you like Eminem, so.
Oh, of course, absolutely, absolutely. Ben and I talked about NBA Playgrounds last week. I was fairly negative at the time. You know this. I spoke to you guys as soon as I played the game. I was disappointed. I had my say in the forum. You posted your initial impressions in the Sunday Substitute this past Sunday. And yeah, so of course you're on the show this week. So thought we'd start off, I guess, by getting some of your thoughts on the game. And we could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I actually wrote something. It's amazing. It's been a while, but yeah, as far as my impressions, I don't really have any outside of those, but I will elaborate and kind of give some more general thoughts about it because I did, in that article, I just kind of gave maybe like three positives and three negatives and then kind of like a general overview. But I think my biggest problem with the game at the moment is that it just seems a bit too hard for a game that should be casual. Like when I go over to my friend's place and he still has a Sega Mega Drive and he has a copy of NBA Jam, and it's something that we can all play despite the fact that they haven't really watched a basketball game since the Michael Jordan era. But it's just one of those games.
The weak Michael Jordan era, that is.
Oh yeah.
Apparently,
the watered down league.
The watered down league. Yep.
Yeah. It's NBA Jam was one of those games that just crossed over into a whole heap of different markets as far as people who don't watch basketball can enjoy NBA Jam. And I was hoping the same thing for NBA Playgrounds, but just the layout mechanics, I guess the fatigue mechanics as well. I did compliment the steel fatigue in my article, but I just think, just in general, you don't get a lot of turbo.
No.
And it's really difficult to get into for that reason, I think.
No, I agree, and obviously we are more hardcore basketball gamers than, and so we should be familiar with NBA Jam and Street and Live and 2K and many other titles. So you would think it would come naturally to us, but even we're sort of having that difficulty, maybe we just suck. But it seems to be a common theme that people are saying that the timing is off especially on layups. I mentioned that last week, and that was. Ben had some more positive thoughts about it, and I'm not going to run down his ideas, especially when he was the end. And they were certainly very valid. I had a very negative impression, so I certainly came into that with bias. And had Ben had a lot of good counterpoints. You can go back to 204 and listen to that, of course.
Yeah, I actually gave it a listen while I was in New South Wales. So as far as where I sit, I'd probably sit somewhere in the middle, but maybe leaning a little bit more towards your side because I do kind of have this very similar grievances to you. And in saying that, though, I haven't played the game online, so I don't know what the online component is like.
My one time trying to play online, I had to wait for about 2 or 3 minutes, and then it disconnected on me. And,
yeah.
That's sort of the night of 2K Pro Am sometimes, but no, it's I am feeling more positive towards it because I started to get some of the strategy down. But to that point, because we are, as I was saying, more experienced, you would think we'd be able to pick it up and play it and really be able to get a grasp of the mechanics straight away. And as you noted, NBA Jam back in the day and Street as well were very much pick up and play and that aim towards the more casual basketball fan, or even if you weren't a huge fan of basketball, again, as you said, it was the game that you played. Live, 2K, all the 5-on-5 games with the more realistic strategy, even realistic by late 90s standards, which has been surpassed, obviously. I would sometimes play them with friends, but friends always, because a lot of my close friends aren't necessarily big basketball fans, they did prefer Jam, and I certainly love Jam as well, so I was happy with that. But that was the game that was casual, so the difficulty you can see being a bit of a barrier. And I know you mentioned like the perfect releases in the Sunday Substitute, and that's been my big thing as well, because obviously when the CPU has the release points, it's a dice roll. But we all know how how the CPU works in basketball video games. That when it needs to win, it can turn it on, and it can, if you will, play with loaded dice when it comes to the dice roll. And I had a game against. I'm up to the boss round, the final in Paris, which is Chris Paul and Blake Griffin, and I was winning, and they just made this huge comeback in the final minute, just making perfect release after perfect release. And when combined with the lightning ball and I think it was the double score for dunks as well, it was just brutal. I'm like, well, I felt like that my skill went out the window, and it really just came down to being a victim of the comeback logic and the dice roll, which was a problem with the original NBA Jam games back in the day too. So it sort of felt a bit antiquated in that respect.
It feels more emphasized though in this game, because at least in NBA Jam, every point still counted the same. Like twos were twos, threes were threes, unless you put those hotspots in the tournament edition, like that you could get in tournament edition. Yeah. But I think perfect releases, that whole thing with the AI, it feels really cheap, because it does feel like they do pull them out more towards the end of the game when they're down. And I remember I saw a video by Troydan Gaming, or maybe just going by Troydan these days, I'm not sure, but he was up by 9 towards the end of the game, and because of all the multipliers and stuff, the person he was playing ended up getting a 9-point play and tying the game and sent the game into OT, which you mentioned, I think, maybe in the thread, that it just keeps playing on. It doesn't stop and do another jump ball or inbound or something like that. So
just continuous.
It's continuous game, and that just would have made me rage something chronic.
And I've had those moments playing, absolutely.
Yeah.
I see the point about how it changes up the gameplay and how it can have this swing, and it's a challenge, and it's different and everything, and I can respect that, and it's good when it feels fair, but when it doesn't, it just feels cheap. And fake difficulty in any genre of video games it bugs me, because it's not, I don't feel challenged in a way that wants me to keep playing. It's like, I just want to switch this off, because this is, I'm not losing because I'm playing poorly. I'm losing because the game has decided I'm not going to win. And that's when it's that random, and people say, well, life is random. Okay, let's get philosophical about it. But, games, there is a certain amount of realism to that, although how much realism you're going to have in a game that has all the power-ups and flying 50 feet above the rim. I mean, I think that's one of the things I've had, one of my main complaints about Playgrounds is that it's kind of been a mishmash of arcade and sim elements, and they sometimes don't really mix.
Yeah, and I think the sim elements come in when it comes to, like, controls and game mechanics, which is the worst area to have sim elements, because you don't want the game to be hard to figure out or to control. Like, the layups is a perfect example of that, because, like, I have missed wide open layups in that game, and I have just no reason why. Like, I have no idea why that happened, and it becomes really frustrating. And I think when I decided to consciously take layups out of my game, I started having more fun. But taking layups out of your game is ridiculous, like, when you think about it, because it's the easiest shot.
Oh, yeah, and even little short twos and hooks and everything, I find that I miss so many shots around the rim in that game that aren't dunks. And in that aforementioned game against CP3 and Griffin, I had, they made the comeback and they were leading by 1. I had about 5 shots at the end there to try and win the game, and little short shots, a 3 missed, and like a 2 missed, and a hook shot missed, and a layup missed, and it really felt like the game has decided I'm not going to win, and that's not fun, because whatever I do, whatever strategy I employ, it's it's like the little kid who you can't beat because he has to win, and I don't think that's the right way to program AI in a basketball game. It's obviously, I think a lot of people have been complaining about it though, and possibly looking at the social media for NBA Playgrounds, it is something that they are doing, taking that feedback into consideration and looking to change it. So, the game has that potential that maybe if they do some tweaks, that's not going to be as bad. Hopefully, fingers crossed.
Here's hoping, because I think the offline element of the game is still very important. Even if they are trying to go for a more online game, it's nice to have a game where you can just play it offline. But I have a question actually. Who is your main combination at the moment?
At the moment, I'm running with Bradley Beal and Hassan Whiteside. They've actually been pretty dominant
All right.
up until those two. Because I think he's got 8 for 3-pointers, so he's pretty strong with that. He can just knock that down. And if you get that first shot, I mean that's so vital. If you can get a 3-pointer with a perfect release and get the 4 points right off the tip, that's a big advantage against the CPU sometimes.
Yeah, definitely. I
Whiteside can dunk and block shots, so yeah, I think running with a big and a guard that can shoot seems to work pretty well.
So you haven't hit any threes with Whiteside yet?
Oh, I've tried some. I don't think I have.
So, so do you find it doesn't work when you try it? But I've seen players like Dwight Howard and DeAndre Jordan hit threes when the AI is controlling them.
Oh yeah,
and that also annoys me.
Absolutely, and it feels like the ratings aren't. That makes sense. Having said that, I do remember back in the day hitting lots of shots with bigs who shouldn't have been able to make them with their ratings in Jam, and also that is the funny thing about the Jam series, that players with a dunk rating of 0 are not supposed to be able to dunk, and it says that on the information screens in game, but they can. So it's just been all one of those things that every Jam game, or the early Jam games, even whether it was the arcade or the home ports, made a point of saying that they can only do layups, but even a player like Muggsy Bogues with a dunk rating of 0 would actually dunk back in the day. So I guess ratings have never really mattered that much in arcade games, but no, that in the hands of the CPU, they do seem to really make those threes, and it's like, well, again, the challenge doesn't seem to come from strategy, good strategy versus bad strategy, or anything like that. It's kind of the CPU decides this is what's going to happen, and
Yeah.
and it feels a little bit cheap when that's the case.
I was going to make a Simpsons reference in the article I wrote, but I decided not to because it didn't really fit in anywhere. But I was going to say that, hey, these ratings are just painted on. Because that's what it feels like sometimes when you're playing the AI.
Would have appreciated it. Who's your duo still? You're still doing with Thonmaker and
My current duo is Maker and Lambeer of all people. But it's mainly because Lambeer has an 8 for a 3-point rating. But initially I started with Lambeer and Louis Scholar because Scholar has an 8 for a 3-point rating. So I like my bigs that can shoot threes. I think they're very handy in playgrounds.
Oh, definitely. I didn't actually remember Lambeer being that good of a 3-point shooter, but maybe he was.
He was decent. Like, at least for the time he was anyway. It was, well, I know, like, you know this, but it was well before 3-point shooting with bigs was really an important thing.
Indeed.
So I guess in the context of that league, he probably was a good 3-point shooter.
Actually, just looking towards the end of his career, he was sort of making like between 30 and 50 a season. Yeah. At like a 36%. So, I mean, for a reasonable amount for a guy who was traditionally, a paint player. Yeah. But, I mean, back in the day, that was a big who could shoot, like, a Carmelo or a Sean Kemp that could make 10 to 15 a year. It's like that was your stretch big back in the day. So,
yeah.
A big with mid-range and the occasional 3-pointer when they were, forced into it. These days, it's DeMarcus Cousins with his 5 threes a game or whatever it is. And, another opportunity for us to be bitter old men, but we will rise above hate, as John Cena would say.
We will.
So, I mean, I have found that the more I've gotten used to it, it has grown on me a little bit. There's part of me that still wishes it was a bit more like NBA Jam. I guess because I want another NBA Jam or Street game. And it makes sense, but I do think that the power-ups play a bigger role than I thought they would. Like, the lottery bar can fill very quickly, and there's even a trophy and or achievement, I guess, on the Xbox One that, on my PS4, obviously, but for activating 5 lottery bar lottery picks in the match, in the game. So it's obviously designed to have as many power-ups and have that as possible. And I feel like they should just be things that tilt it. Kind of like on Fire, you had to make the 3 shots, and that wasn't always easy to make the 3 baskets without the opponent making it as well. So it was kind of...
Yeah.
It kind of reflected the whole on fire aspect of basketball better, I think. It just feels like the power-ups are a bit... Especially with such a short game, it feels like they're perhaps a little bit too overpowered, maybe. Like, they went a bit too far with the gimmick, but at the same time had all these sim elements. It's, again, just seems to be that mishmash of arcade and sim that works in some ways, but in other ways it's kind of don't want to say misguided, but it certainly needs to be tuned, if nothing else. I feel.
I think it definitely does. And if they are looking to make more games in the series, then I don't know. I guess limiting the importance of those lottery picks and stuff like that during the game. Although I guess they do need to strike a balance in there some way, because it is like a very arcade game, and games like NBA Street were able to succeed with something very similar. So
Game breakers, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
that's a fair point.
Yeah, it's. I guess they just need to strike a better balance. So
and with the release, and they're obviously listening to the feedback, as I said. So that's that's certainly promising. They're adding more players. Kenny the Jet Smith is coming into the game. They've had him taking on Shaq, getting his revenge on Shaq in the game. So
I believe I read Giannis as well. So they're bringing in Giannis.
Yep. Klay Thompson, I think, and because he wasn't in the original lineup, which I think we pointed out when we were talking about that was kind of strange that he wasn't in there.
Yeah, but nobody really cares about Klay Thompson anyway, do they?
NBA Live 2004 creator player. So they're obviously doing the post-release support. I also hope they, and I mentioned this last week as well, as you know, if they add play with friends, because you and I can't jump on. It'd be great if after we finish recording, say, hey, let's see what the online's like and go head to head in this. But there's no play with friends option, which I think if you're going to do online these days, you really need to have that. To be able to challenge the friend and even if there's no ongoing series or stats keeping between them, just being able to play some exhibition games against a friend like that is important.
I think so, because it's definitely a game that kind of lends itself to that. And I find myself these days, like personally speaking, I don't play video games with my friends in the same room all that much. Like I'm not really. I am a social gamer when it comes to playing online, but not so much when it comes to playing games in person. Not as much as it was in the 90s, because that was so much of a part of my growing up, playing video games with my friends, because that's all we had.
Yeah.
So
I remember that you maybe play some basketball in the backyard or the driveway or something. You go inside, you play some video games. You sort of alternate. Certainly, my cousin and I did that when he came to stay with us in the school holidays. Sitting in front of a computer with a friend, or sitting on the couch with friends around the TV or whatever. And you're right. I mean, I sometimes do that with my friends these days. We might, if we're having a party at someone's place, we might have the PS4 out and playing something. It's probably going to be a fighting game like Injustice or Mortal Kombat, though. Something that kind of everyone is kind of get on board with, more so than maybe a game like Jam or Playgrounds these days. So it does come, it's because you're not going to be in the same room as everyone these days, and because you do have the online gaming, it is something that you do need. So I was a bit surprised to see that, but I do know they are adding more modes and such, or have plans to do that. So fingers crossed they have play with friends, because it is something that's sort of missing from that online experience. It's good, and even something with 2K Prime where they don't have, you can't directly challenge another team. I remember when we had the two NLSC squads going at it in 2K16. That was fun, but that
was a lot of fun. Yeah,
but it sort of had to happen randomly, because we had played. I think we both played a couple of games before that, just hoping that we'd match up, and then finally we did. So it's there's obviously it's not being able to challenge everyone in every single mode, but the fact that we can get on together and form a squad and play is just being able to have that social experience, like you are sitting around a couch, that you get in the party chat and do that. It's but yeah, anyway, I do think they should add that, and hopefully they do, and hopefully they do keep tuning and listening to the feedback, and it's kind of nice to know that I'm not just the lone grumpy old man complaining about how it's not NBA Jam, but that and it is their first things. I mean, their first games. I guess I was a bit harsh at first, but it's hard not to get your expectations up, I suppose, when you do have these classics to compare to.
Particularly with all the promise that was around it as well, because we haven't had a an arcade title since NBA Jam On Fire Edition, wasn't it?
Yeah,
was that the last one?
2011, yeah.
So it's been a long time. So six years. That's a whole new generation of consoles. So
yeah,
it's something that we kind of have been waiting for a long time. Not exactly like Duke Nukem Forever, but it's been a long time.
We've had other things to sate our basketball gaming. There's another word for you, sate our basketball gaming appetite. in recent years. But again, the arcade experience, absolutely. Well, we've had my park, I suppose, but it's still the mechanics are still reasonably sim in my park. I mean, there's no 20-foot dunks, so
Yeah, that's true.
give it time. There is a jetpack. Give it time.
Yeah. Don't take that on board, 2K, please. I still want the park to be relatively sim.
Yeah, a casual sim for the park, I think. So I guess that's about it. All my thoughts for Playgrounds for this week. Hopefully it does get better. But yeah, I've been giving it a bit more of a go. So it goes to show if first impressions don't always last. I suppose.
No, and there's definitely, you definitely have the option to change your mind on a lot of things. And, it just goes to show as well, like, we've had previous games that have been great out of the box and have gone downhill, and some that have been not as great out of the box and have gotten better. So our initial impressions are just that. They're what we experience initially and don't exactly represent what the product may be in the future. So I think that's important to keep in mind.
Everyone reserves the right to change their mind if given reason to.
Yeah, exactly. You summarized it better than I did.